Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and that was a solo dedicated to Art Blakey called Blakey's End. And this is from a book called Jazz Solos, Volume 1, and it's part of a series I've been doing using all the solos I used to teach my students. Now, these are published solos, you can buy them, and they're not transcriptions, they're kind of recreations of these drummers' styles. And this one is pretty accurate. It's dedicated, like I said, to Art Blakey, and it contains a lot of Blakey-isms, things that he does. Now, Art Blakey wasn't the greatest technician in the terms of traditional rudimental technique or anything, but what he lacked in that kind of technique, he sure made up with in the fire in his playing, his groove, his feel, his just, I don't know, his spirit is a great word for it. Just an incredible player. Now, when I was a kid, I was lucky enough to see Art Blakey many, many times in lots of situations with different groups. And those groups were part of his band called the Jazz Messengers. So I saw him with Wynton Marsalis and Branford Marsalis, saw him with Terence Blanchard and Donald Harrison, and several other folks through this program called the Jazzmobile in New York, which was kind of this trailer that would roll around New York, and every week it would park itself. In my case, I saw the shows at Grant's Tomb, uptown in New York, and they would have different artists play, and this trailer would open up, and you'd have drums and a keyboard or a piano, really. And I saw so many great players throughout the years in the summer play that way. They also had shows at the South Street Seaport and things like that. So New York was really alive with these kinds of live performances. And I'd go to every single one that I could. And sometimes the Jazz Messengers would play those. Then later on, when I got old enough, I would see them in the clubs, like the Blue Note and clubs like that. So I got to see him play many, many times, and I always enjoyed seeing him play. And for me, it was great because he always looked so happy when he was playing. A lot of the drummers, they looked so serious to me when I was a kid. You know, they almost scared me a little, how serious they looked. But he was always so joyful in his playing, and watching him play was a real treat. He also had incredible power. He could control the band with his dynamics, so when he played soft, everybody came down. And when a soloist was playing and it seemed like they weren't doing what he wanted, he would just nail that bass drum and just kick them in the butt, really, and then they'd straighten out. These were things that I noticed lots of times him doing with different versions of his groups. There's a great book out if you want to learn about art. I'll show it to you. It's by John Ramsey, and he was, I believe, he's a drummer also, a very good drummer, and he was Art Blakey's road manager for a few years and traveled around with him, so he's got, he would watch him do sound checks and all that, and I'm sure he's pretty much an expert on him. And this book is great, so I definitely recommend that if you're into Art Blakey. Also, you need to listen to things. My favorite playing of his, besides the Jazz Messengers, is what he did with Thelonious Monk. I love the way he played on those records. Very, very simple, but just so perfect. It's kind of like Ringo with the Beatles, just the right guy at the right time, really. So those are great records. And it was hard to play with Monk because he was, elusive in a lot of ways. Frankie Dunlap is another great drummer who sounded great with Monk as well. So listen to those records. And then, of course, so many Jazz Messengers records. There's so many good ones. The live ones are my favorite. So check those out whenever you can. The energy is unbelievable. So let's talk about the solo. It starts in an Art Blakey fashion. I am adding these cymbal crashes. They're not written. So just a big explosion, just to wake everybody up. And then he's doing the famous Art Blakey 2-4 hi-hat, which was always there, and just always driving that band. So I am doing the tempo of this as quarter note equals 240. So I'm doing it at 120 on 2-4. We'll just play a little bit of the opening for you. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts loud, comes down, and then builds up. And that tom thing is a real common thing a lot of drummers did back then, where it's like almost the conga pattern when you hear that being played in jazz, which I don't particularly like, but that's what you hear. You'll also notice I'm playing my bass drum lightly on all four, which is called feathering. That kind of grounds the kit. It gives you a nice warm sound underneath. It shouldn't be loud. This isn't a swing era, all right? But Art would do that as well, very, very lightly, so you feel it more than hear it. That's not written in the solo, but I am doing it. It kind of fills it out. Now, at bar 9, you get to the most difficult part technically of the solo, where you have to do these cross-rim clicks with the left hand, and that's pretty difficult. I recommend playing with the butt end out. So in other words, if you're playing with your left hand, it would go towards your right like that. For you match grip players, you can turn the stick around like that, okay? But you don't want to play the cross rim with the tip out. To me, that sounds kind of wimpy. This sounds better. It's much more solid. So try to keep your butt end out. And if you're a traditional player, you just flip it like this. If you're a match player, you flip it like that. No big deal, okay? So you can get back to where you need to be. So technically, this is very difficult to get these. You want to maybe try to accent the second beat. It's kind of a comping riff there. But with the cymbal, it gives you kind of a fit coordination-wise, just because of the nature of the click. And I like that little bass drum answer to all the questions that came before it. And then we get to bar 17, and we're doing this tom rim thing. So that's definitely so much Art. He would do that when he kept time. He would do all kinds of switching up and things like that. You know, the funny thing about Art Blakey is there's not a lot of imitators out there. There's a lot of Elvin imitators. There's a lot of Philly Joe imitators. His style lends itself well to being copied. There aren't, and of course there's a lot of Tony Williams imitators. There's not really many Art Blakey imitators because, again, his technique was just sort of different. And it's hard to copy that style, his sound. We'll talk about his famous press roll in a minute. But these kinds of things lend themselves to playing all kinds of soloing. So a great example of this is the second ending, where he does this. So what he's doing in that case is using the bass drum as another voice. So he's filling in with the bass drum like this. And that was something that a lot of drummers did back then. Philly Joe, of course, did it a lot, but Art did it all the time. So that bass drum became an integral part whenever he filled or played solos doing that. And that's really what's different about bebop or hard bop versus the swing era. A lot of those guys would just play solos on their snare drum. And the bass drum would just be doom, 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 and 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. But then we had the snare drum and the bass drum integrated in the new style of music that came along. Now, in bar 29, we have a big explosion and then a really great use of space in this solo. So that's something that Art did as well. He would leave space. He would build up this big crescendo, and then bam, there'd just be the hi-hat going, which is really effective, and then build it up again from there. So he has this hi-hat going, and then these little riffs. I'll play that for you at 29. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is, again, a Blakeyism where he does all singles. That's something he did a lot as well. So don't be afraid to leave space in your solos. It's really, really effective to do that. A lot of drummers don't do that. It's just, full blast all the time. And there's a lot of space in the solo. It's one of the reasons I really like the solo. Now, the famous press roll, which I spoke about before, was something he did a lot. And that's basically a closed roll. Some people attribute to the saying, when in doubt, roll, to Art Blakey. I'm not sure he said that, but, I hear that a lot. In other words, if you're lost or something, or you're having a bad day, just roll. I thought that was hilarious. Well, in this solo, you have this section of 53 that's a continuous press roll. And this can be interpreted a few ways. The way it's written is this. The way I'm interpreting it is this. Because that's the way I remember seeing him play that kind of thing with the roll and the accents. All right, so I'm interpreting it like that, but if you play it as written, again, it sounds like this. With that one hand playing and then the other hand playing the buzz. So that's up to you. I would try it both ways. It's always good to have that extra thing. All right, and then 61, we have that Blakeyism, again, with the singles. And then the climax of the solo, the biggest part of it, is at the end, the last 5 bars or so, where he's doing this. And at this tempo, that's almost straight, but not. So swing it just a little like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, that's something he did a lot. Those combinations of toms and snare drum together. Harmonically, that can sound really good, depending on how you have your drums tuned. So this is a really good representation of his playing. And again, I really love these solos because they're not transcriptions, so it's kind of a best of. When you do transcriptions, it depends on what that drummer, how good they were playing that day. Of course, there's some great transcriptions. There's books out now, the Philly Joe solo book is out, which has hundreds of solos in it, which is great. I've done most of those when I was younger, so I have them already, and my students have been doing it for a long time. But these kinds of books that are dedicated to certain drummers, these solos, I really like using these a lot, like I said, because you're constructing a musical solo out of the style of the drummer. So I'll just play a little and tune in next time. I think the next one I'm going to do is an Elvin solo from this book, so watch for that.